White Noise, Don DeLillo, boom. I love this book in parts. If you haven't read it, there might be some spoilers in this, so don't watch it. But I will say it's worth the read. I took so many notes on this. It's basically about this guy, Jack, and his family. They're trying to survive an airborne toxic event, and it brings up their fear of death. Jack deals with his fear of death by becoming a professor of Hitler studies. His wife deals with the fear of death by taking pills and doing some other things that compromise the marriage. But throughout it all, there's kind of this deadpan prose, this deadpan dialogue between Jack, his wife. He's married 4 times, as a matter of fact, and twice to the wife that we meet in the book, Babette. He married her first, then he married her fourth. And between them, they have 7 kids. Now, in the book, you don't meet all 7. You meet primarily, I think, 3 or 4 of them. But in total, they have 7 kids. And their relationship becomes uh, not fractured, but there's tension in that they're both trying to deal with death, him in his way, her in her way, and then the kids are in the middle. But they all seem kind of nonplussed by anything that's happening. They're talking over each other, past each other, but they never at any point in the book do you feel like they're really talking to each other, trying to get a little deeper. And the cost of that is I, as a reader, then did not feel emotionally attached to any of the characters. It seemed like it was the point of Don DeLillo to kind of keep the characters detached in that so that he can really drive home his points of fear, media, information overload, the cost of technology, all those things. It seemed like a book that was more thematically driven than character driven. Now, with that said, rich dialogue, rich ideas. One of the things that draws you into the book, and as you can see here, this is my notebook, and I have 2.5 pages of notes. I'm not gonna go over all the notes, but one of the things that draws you into it is you can see that Jack has a love for his wife, Babette. And you know that because he says, "She makes me feel sweetly rewarded. I watch her all the time doing things in measured sequence." That's beautiful. I been my girlfriend for almost 6 years, and I just love watching her do things, doing the dishes, working on her laptop, playing with the dog. I could just watch my girl all day. Sometimes she's walking the dog outside, and I just look through the window. It's just something about watching the creature in its natural habitat that is alluring and just makes you feel more connected and proud to be with that person. So I really related to that. There's another part in the book where he says, he's talking about his son Heinrich, which is a funny name, right? And funny because Jack is so into Hitler studies that I believe he names his son Heinrich as a way of connecting to Hitler studies, but really his studying Hitler is a way of connecting himself to something that's bigger than him, that gives his life some kind of meaning. I think it's part of why some people join a church, some people, they become a Buddhist. He chose Hitler's studies because he knew that there would be no other, there's a wealth of knowledge in books about Hitler and World War II and that whole thing. So it would be something that could consume his entire life. He would never run out of material, which, interestingly, there's this movie called Materialism by Celine Song, and it's about materialists. And when we traditionally think about materialists, we think about people who focus on primarily like, what do you make? How tall are you? How do you look? The color of your skin, the complexion, the clothes you're wearing, the shoes, the car, things of that nature. But there's another form of materialism that just sees people as a bunch of neurochemicals, hormones, and electrical uh, impulses shooting through the brain, right? And they don't see people as more than that. So think about like scientists and maybe even some psychologists and sociologists, where they're just seeing people as a bunch of chemicals and hormones, um, and just DNA, electrical impulses shooting, or basically it's like we're robots and we're pre-programmed. And if I stimulate this part of your brain, I can get you to do this. And if I stimulate this part of your brain, I can get you to feel that. So that's another form of materialism that I don't think gets talked often enough about. And you hear it with a lot of podcasts. And the reason why it's relevant to this is that there's one character, Murray, who kind of sees people as that. And he says, facts threaten our happiness. So the more information we take in, the more facts we take in, the less happy we become. And you see this with news, right? The more news that you consume, the more it consumes you, right? There's a point where it's so overwhelming, it's so overburdened, and then you become dysregulated. And now you really can't focus on what you need to do, and you become misaligned. Um, so to be aware of how facts, information, throughout the entire book, White Noise, there's always like a TV, a radio, or something in the background that you never get a sense that as they're navigating this toxic airborne event, that there's quiet, there's peace, there's solitude. And when I think about when I took a trip up to Lake Tahoe, I remember I got up early one morning, and I'm sitting on the lake, and I just started tearing because it was the first time in a very long time I had experienced absolute silence. And you'd be shocked. You might get quiet, right? But it's so rare to find absolute silence. I'm on a cruise ship right now. There's always like a or a buzz or something from the refrigerator or the outdoor. There's always a background electrical sound taking place. A car going by. There's something technologically making some type of white noise. So this is the importance of getting out into nature, going out on a boat, that kind of thing, going for a hike to get away from that white noise that we were so used to, we don't even recognize it anymore. Another quote I want to read to you from the book is, he says, "The more money I spent, the less important it seemed. I felt expansive." I thought that was a beautiful way of thinking about why some people spend so much money, because the book also was talking about consumerism, in that there's a point where there's so much chaos because of the destruction that this airborne toxic event is happening, that his anchor is the supermarket. And he feels like if the supermarket is still open, well lit, and well stocked, then things are going to be okay. The day that all of a sudden there's no food on the shelves, the store is dark, there's no one working there, then he knows it's all, gone downhill. And I thought that was a great way of thinking about things. When I fly on a plane, so a lot of times not a lot of times, but sometimes there's turbulence, and you'll see some people freaking out, being worried, having a panic attack, feeling very anxious, popping a Xanax. I look at the flight attendants to see how nervous they are. And if they're not that nervous, then I'm not that nervous, right? To me, they are my supermarket. And so I love how the supermarket is the anchor for how anxious he's going to feel, or how peaceful or grounded or hopeful he's going to feel. And I feel like we all have our supermarkets in our life, that thing that as long as this is okay, then we'll be okay overall, even though all these other signs are pointing to destruction and collapse. Another thing I want to I want to read from here is he says that whatever relaxes you is dangerous. That's such a beautiful sentiment, and that, you know, it goes back to the Xanax. I was on a flight recently, and a lady offered me a Xanax, and I thought, like, if I take this and I pass out and I'm not functional, I'm kind of delirious and too relaxed, if there is a catastrophe and I do need to get up and make it out the exit door, I may not be able to. I may not even wake up. Now, it could be that I'm so relaxed that I survive if the plane crashes, because, you know, it's like the more relaxed person is one who survives the crash. But it could also be the thing that then I can't get myself up and out of a plane that may be sinking or on fire. So whatever relaxes you is dangerous. And that doesn't mean that you don't get a massage or take a hot bath, what have you. It means that you don't stay in the hot bath for too long. You know, take it for 20 minutes. You don't stay on a massage table. You set boundaries around what is relaxing you. And also making sure that that's not the first thing you go to. You know, going back to the taking a pill on a plane, there are other ways to address the racing thoughts and the anxiety, whether it's, you know, drinking cold water or a hot tea, naming things, focusing on your breath, getting a lot of exercise before you get on a flight, not drinking caffeine. There are a number of behavioral things that we can do to relax ourselves so that we're not putting ourselves in harm's way, right? And then the last thing I want to read from this book is that he says, eating is the only form of professionalism most people ever attain. So when I talk about like the book being funny, he says these things and I go, that's pretty funny, because, you know, people are like, I'm a foodie, you know, and I'm like, everybody's a foodie, right? And everybody has an opinion about food and where to eat, and we're just so strong on this is the best restaurant and that's the best burger, and this is the best beer, that kind of thing. And you don't really hear people talk about anything else with that much passion and fervor as they do about food and eating. So I hope that you have other hobbies and other interests outside of food and eating. I appreciate you tuning in to this podcast, because I do have a podcast. This book review, White Noise, Don DeLillo. It's worth the read in parts. Like I said, because it's kind of deadpan in its humor. And there's really no plot to this book. There's no plot besides the extinction level event, but even that is, you know, just in the middle. There's nothing propelling you forward unless you're delighted, as I was, by the dialogue and the insights and the thoughts that he shared in the book. Thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, let me know if you've read White Noise. What were your thoughts? Peace.